Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Bryan DeBois. Hi, Bryan.
Hi.
It's great to have you on the podcast. We're going to have a great conversation about a topic that is it's very much top of mind for many of our listeners, which is AI. And I interviewed several experts on the podcast about AI, but your angle is different because we're going to talk about manufacturing and the effect that AI has on manufacturing and industrial systems, which I think it's fascinating. And it's a topic that many of the entrepreneurs that are listening to us right now, or maybe anyone on the leadership team, or even people that are working in manufacturing and with industrial systems, have those questions. So, but first of all, let me start with introducing you correctly and reading your bio, so people know why you have the authority to and the know-how to discuss that.
Sure.
Okay, so Bryan, you are the Director of Industrial AI at RoviSys, and one of the largest independent global system integrators focused on manufacturing and industrial customers. So obviously you're working with big companies, but what we're going to discuss here applies to any manufacturing company.
That's right. That's right.
And during the 20 years you worked there, you focused on manufacturing execution systems, historians, plant floor software, and level 3 information solutions in the operational technology space. Your current focus is on operationalizing technologies such as artificial intelligence, basically taking technologies and making operational and applying them, data infrastructure, and advanced analytics to boost the productivity of global manufacturers. So let's first of all start with your viewpoint, and from your experience, what have you seen lately or in the last few months change in terms of AI? What are the trends in terms of AI in manufacturing?
Well, and it's a good question to ask because this stuff is changing so fast, right? And so I would go back, I would say over the last 12 months, the big topic that obviously everyone's talking about is agentic AI, right? And everyone's trying to figure out where AI agents are going to fit into the broader ecosystem. And where my take on that is maybe a little different. One of the things that makes manufacturing unique is that the stakes on the plant floor are much, much higher than they are in a lot of other places where AI gets applied, right? So let's think about leveraging generative AI in fields like marketing, those types of things. You know, if the generative AI comes out with some kind of funny marketing blurb that doesn't make any sense, so that's called hallucination, right? Where it'll just make stuff up. When it does those types of things, we all kind of laugh and we forward it to our colleagues, and then we go in and fix it. Unfortunately, that doesn't, on the plant floor, the stakes are much, much higher. If you give the wrong information to the wrong person at the wrong time on the plant floor, you could kill somebody. I mean, so there's a reason why I think, there's a reason why surgeons are not going and using generative AI in surgery, right? It's the same reason why it's not appropriate to use generative AI on the plant floor. There's just no room for error. And so we can't have that kind of guesswork and those kinds of hallucinations. And especially, the modern LLM, large language model, or generative AI is the broader umbrella term for it. The modern generative AI model is weirdly confident in its own incorrectness. And so it'll make things up, but it'll say it, as you've probably seen, it'll say, it'll make facts up and then it'll say it with all kinds of authority behind it, and it's just wrong. It's just completely fabricated. And that there's good reason why. It's because LLMs are programmed not to say I don't know. And so we can't have that on the plant floor. So whereas everyone is looking at these agents.
That's actually a very good point. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people know that they're
Right.
actually programmed to say, I don't know.
Yeah, they're not programmed to say, I don't know. They're programmed to give an answer. And part of that, and we can get into all the technical details, part of that goes back to they used a certain kind of what's called human reinforcement learning, where basically armies of humans graded the responses of the LLM over time. And then based on the grades, it learned what responses humans prefer. And humans didn't like when it waffled. Humans didn't like when it hedged its bets and said, I think it could be this, but I actually could be wrong. They didn't like those. And so they constantly, when it came in and said, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about, here's the answer, humans rated those responses higher. So unfortunately, what we've done is we've trained these AIs not to say, I don't know, to be overly confident and not to be careful about, how they respond to things. Now, they're trying to walk that back, and we've seen with some of the AI, the LLMs, that they're getting better at giving more nuanced answers and not getting over their skis. Anyway, the point is.
Yeah, the point is, let's talk about manufacturing. So
Correct.
what would you recommend to use for manufacturing?
Right. So the types of problems that we face on the plant floor are also not really appropriate for generative AI, because generative AI is primarily focused on solving knowledge problems. On the plant floor, we have operational problems, and that's kind of a different class of problem. And so there are two primary types of AI models that we use to solve operational problems. The first category would be what I call traditional AI, but these are analytical and predictive models that have actually been around for a long time. These are not new models. And so we can build predictive models to be able to predict things like, what's the final quality of this batch going to be? And we can predict that well before the batch even goes to testing. Be able to use analytical models to get dialed in on better set points than the set points that we're using on the plant floor today, okay? So those are traditional AI. The second big category, and the one that I actually lean into a lot, that I really think is going to be a game changer in our industry, is what's called autonomous AI. And autonomous AI is unique amongst all other types of AI in that it actually has been proven to be able to reason. So it's been proven to be able to understand causal connections and then be able to build long-term strategy and act on it like a human can. So that autonomous AI is really in a lot of ways what my clients are looking for. They're looking for expertise on the plant floor. Unfortunately, that search for expertise on the plant floor has in a lot of times led them towards generative AI, and I have to kind of yank them back and be like, that's not the right direction. The direction you want for expertise on the plant floor is a model that knows the process, knows how to operate that part of the process like an expert operator, and can look over the shoulder of a novice operator and can make recommendations on, hey, you need to be making this change. I would make this change. You've got this order coming down the pipe. You're going to want to make sure that you've got all these set points set in preparation for that. Those are the types of things that autonomous AI is capable of doing.
That makes total sense. And Bryan, as you know, what we do is we create and document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures, right? I'm an industrial engineer. It's all about processes. And I'm glad you said that the AI, in order to train the AI and in order for the AI to be effective, we got to have the processes very well understood.
Yes.
Because otherwise, the AI is not going to just invent. I mean, it could invent processes, but we don't want that. We want the AI to understand the processes. So then those recommendations can be made. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. And so I was out at a manufacturer, just to emphasize that point. I was out at a manufacturer a couple weeks ago, and they have very manual processes. They have no data collection, and they're looking to bring in AI. They've got big ideas about robotics and things like that. And I'm like, we can't leverage AI to do anything that there's not already an existing system in place, that there's not already data collection in place around. Like, they thought that AI was going to come in and be their savior, and they wouldn't have to do kind of the typical block and tackle that's required to collect data, to systematize processes. They thought that they could somehow skip that. I'm like, no, like you have to have all that in place, and then the AI can make it better and
I
make
know
it faster.
what is so surprising to me. I mean, I'm thinking like almost like the picture I get in my mind is that people think that there's those little AIs that are going to walk in, like the Pac-Man, and it's like walking
Right.
in and go, oh, we're going to figure out the process and then we're going to do it, but without having the intermediate step. It's the same thing in marketing. AI can spit a lot of things, but if you want to maintain your voice, if you want to maintain the emotional tone of your business, if you want to be who you are, yes, I mean, we know we use AI all the time, but we went through an exercise, very thorough exercise, to recognize what is our voice. Because one
Yeah.
thing that I also noticed, and that also applies to what you do, like for instance, today I got a written piece by somebody that was applying for work with us, and I do a test to have them write things to see how they write. So they did analyze the call with the client that they listened to correctly, but it really toned down the nuances and the
Mm,
emotional tone.
mm.
And that neutral kind of like, like that vanilla, like applies to everything, that has the sense of AI, because it can be company A, it can be company B, it can be
Right.
company C. It applies to anything, but not to the specifics and the nuances that we are looking for. And I think it's the same thing of what you're describing. In order for the process to work, you have to learn the process for that particular industry, for that particular
That's right.
manufacturer.
And let me build on that. So that particular customer, right? They are a leader in what they do. It is a very niche market. I won't say what the product is that they make, but they make a very specific product it's a B2B type thing. They're not selling to consumers. It's a very specific product a lot rides on this product being right and not failing. And so they take a ton of pride, this company does, in what they do. But then they want like cookie cutter solutions that are, like you said, that could work for anyone, that are not tailored for what they do. And I'm trying, I'm there to make them understand, like, what we do as a system integrator is we capture that competitive advantage, that differentiator that you're describing. It's the same thing for any company. It doesn't matter if you make something like my customers do, or you do something else. Like, there are competitive advantages that you have. There's differentiators you have. We have to capture that competitive advantage, those differentiators in that AI, because you're not going to be able to go out and buy an off-the-shelf product that's somehow going to be able to do that, that's made for every business under the sun, and is just this kind of generic product. And so,
It's so true.
yeah.
So, Bryan, how do you do that? How do you actually capture that competitive advantage?
Yeah. So there's two different ways. One of them is that competitive advantage is hidden in the data. So we have to have data. We pore over the data, and we want volumes of data. And the good news is for the most part, I would say 7 to 8 out of 10 of the customers that I talk to, they got the message that we've been hammering for the last 20, 25 years, that you need to be collecting data on the plant floor. And most of my customers got that message, and so they've got lots of data, which is great. So now we've got something we can build on, right? So that's part of it. But the second part of it is through a process we call machine teaching. And through machine teaching, that's where we actually sit down with their experts and we pick their brain. And we say, teach us the same way you would teach a new operator on this process, a new hire. And they teach us, and they'll give us all these great little tips and tricks about, well, if you do this, then you're going to want to compensate here. And if you turn this knob, you got to turn this knob over here. We capture all of that expertise. And through a somewhat proprietary process, we actually then send that into the AI, the autonomous AI. And the autonomous AI actually can use that to learn to get better. So it will then learn with that, accompanied with, it'll run for about a day of training, but it runs very fast in the simulator. So by the time it's done, it's like it's trained for about 20 to 30 years in human terms. So combined with that machine teaching expertise, and then the time that it just experienced, just running and failing, and then learning from its failure, those two things together make it an expert level by the time that it's done training.
That's beautiful. That is very similar to what you're doing with the machines is what we do in terms of the knowledge transfer.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do that before you automate. So I completely agree. What do you foresee in terms of none of us have a crystal ball, but I'm sure you're being asked that question a lot. Where do you think this is going? Where do you think the AI use in manufacturing and systems, where is it going?
Yeah, so I think the way that I see it is I think we're going to see a convergence of a lot of these different disciplines. So right now you're seeing generative AI, which is everywhere and everyone's talking about it, and that's the predominant AI. But that's not the only kind of AI, right? So you're seeing generative AI, but we're already starting to see its limitations too, right? We're seeing that whereas a couple years ago, we were seeing just version after version and the capabilities, just huge leaps in capabilities. We're starting to see that start to taper off and we're starting to see a plateau, right? So people are starting to realize, oh, maybe we've hit some of the limits of generative AI. Maybe hallucinations are inherent in these large language models, which I actually happen to think they are. And so we may never be able to actually completely get away from hallucinations. So what I see the future as is the combination of generative AI for that human to machine interface, that natural language piece of it. I see generative AI for that because you can't beat it at that. But then I see it married to some of these other AI, like autonomous AI, which uses deep reinforcement learning under the hood, which is a completely different type of AI. I see the marriage of those two, where now I can have a conversation with the AI through the generative AI, but then it's offloading the actual strategy and decision making to an AI that's actually built to do that, which is the autonomous AI. So I see the marriage of those two, really the hybrid of those two, to be kind of the future, where generative AI is understanding when it gets over its skis and handing off then to other AI to actually do some of the heavy lifting, proven AI that's been around for a while, to do some of the heavy decision making and heavy lifting. And honestly, I mean, that's not that far from how our own brains work. So I think that I think that's the right combination for us to look at.
Great. Bryan, if our listeners would like to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so probably the best way would go to my company's website. So as you mentioned, I work for a company called RoviSys, and that's RoviSys.com. Or check me out on LinkedIn and connect with me there. It's Bryan DeBois on LinkedIn, and if you just search me up, you'll find me. And always happy to connect with anyone and talk about this stuff.
Fantastic. That's been a great conversation. Definitely, I'm sure our listeners learned from it because you just brought up the points that are pain points for a lot of people. So I definitely appreciate that, and with solutions. So thank you very much for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you, Adi.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.